howling hall reeked of desperation and crushed dreams. Lirali pressed herself against the cold stone wall, trying to become invisible as another Omega was dragged onto the rejection platform. 3 years ago, she'd stood on that same platform, publicly cast aside by her intended mate for being defective, an Omega who couldn't properly scent match with any alpha in the pack. Now she worked here, cleaning blood and tears from the wooden boards after each rejection ceremony. It was the only work a rejected Omega could find in Shadowmere. "Bring out the rogue," the Beta Enforcer, Mordecai Ironhold, commanded from his position beside the platform. His pale eyes found Lyrali in the crowd, and his lips curved into a possessive smile that made her skin crawl. He'd been pressing his suit for months, insisting that a rejected Omega should be grateful for any attention. Lately, something in his manner had shifted, a coldness behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. The crowd erupted in vicious anticipation as guards dragged a figure from the holding cells. Lirali's breath caught. The prisoner was enormous, even bent and shackled. Dark hair fell over his face, matted with blood, but she could see the powerful lines of his body beneath the torn clothing. Rogues were usually scrawny, half-mad wolves who'd been exiled from their packs. This man looked like he could tear through his chains if he chose to. "Caught stealing from our borders," Mordecai announced, though his voice carried an odd undertone. "No pack marks. No identification. By law, he'll serve as slave labor unless someone claims him." He paused dramatically. "Starting bid is 5 silver. The rogue lifted his head, and Lirali saw his eyes, deep amber, like burnished gold, scanning the crowd with calculating intelligence. Not the wild look of a true rogue at all. When his gaze swept past her, she felt an inexplicable pull in her chest, as if something deep within her recognized him. Ancient words carved into the platform's base seemed to pulse. "When 6 becomes 1, the hungry shall wake." She'd never noticed them before. "Look at those scars," someone called out. "Probably rabid. Should put him down before he infects others." A stone flew from the crowd, striking the prisoner's ribs. He didn't flinch, but Lirali saw his jaw tighten. Another stone followed, then another. The crowd's bloodlust was building, feeding on itself. 2 silver. Mordecai dropped the price when no bids came. Surely someone needs a strong back for labor. The rogue's breathing was labored, and Lirali noticed the strange pattern of wounds across his chest. Not random injuries, but deliberate marks that looked almost like symbols. Poison marks. She'd seen similar wounds on wolves who'd encountered the deadly wolfsbane that grew in the ashlands. Without treatment, he'd be dead within days. 1 silver, Mordecai said, frustration creeping into his voice. Lyrali found herself moving forward before she could think. "I'll take him." The hall fell silent. Every eye turned to her, the rejected Omega who dared to bid on a rogue. Mordecai's face darkened, a shadow passing behind his eyes. "Lyrali, you forget yourself." "You offered 1 silver, she said, pulling the coin from her pouch, her entire savings from months of scrubbing floors. "I'm claiming him according to law." "You're a rejected Omega," someone sneered. "You can't claim anything." "The law says any pack member can bid." Lyrali lifted her chin. "I'm still pack, even if rejected." Mordecai stepped down from the platform, approaching her with predatory intent. "You need my permission for any significant decisions. As the Beta courting you?" "We're not courting," Lyrali interrupted. "I've refused you 3 times. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist hard enough to bruise. "You ungrateful." A growl erupted from the platform, so deep and threatening that the entire hall went quiet. The rogue had straightened to his full height, his chains rattling as he strained against them. His eyes were fixed on Mordecai's hand on Lirali's wrist, and the sound coming from his chest was pure alpha dominance. Not possible. Rogues couldn't produce that kind of commanding presence. Mordecai released her, hand going to his blade. "Control your property, Omega, or I'll put him down myself." Lyrelai quickly climbed the platform, placing herself between Mordecai and the prisoner. "He's mine by law. I'm taking him now." She reached for the rogue's chains, and he went still. This close, she could smell him beneath the blood and dirt. Pine forests and winter storms, wild and intoxicating. Her dormant Omega instincts, the ones that had never responded to any alpha before, suddenly roared to life. His nostrils flared, and his amber eyes widened as if he scented something equally unexpected from her. "Move," she whispered, tugging the chains. He followed her down from the platform, through the parting crowd, past Mordecai's furious glare. Behind them, she heard the beta snarl. "This isn't over, Lyrelai. You've made a dangerous choice." As they exited the howling hall, the rogue stumbled, his breathing growing more labored. The poison was spreading faster than she'd thought. "My cottage is close," she said, though she wasn't sure he understood. "Just hold on." He made a sound that might have been acknowledgement, leaning heavily against her as they walked. His body radiated heat like a fever, and she could feel the strange tension in his muscles, as if he was fighting not just the poison, but something else. They'd barely made it through her door when his legs gave out. But instead of collapsing completely, he caught himself against the wall, his hand suddenly gripping her shoulder. Not roughly, but with desperate intensity. "Safe?" he rasped, the single word heavily accented but understandable. "Yes," she breathed. "You're safe." His eyes searched hers, and for a moment that amber gaze flickered with something else, a flash of deep purple, the color of royal alpha bloodlines. Then his eyes rolled back, and he crashed to the floor. Lyrelai stared at his unconscious form, her mind racing. Purple eyes were legendary, belonging only to the strongest Alpha Kings, but that was unthinkable. The Alpha King ruled from the distant Valdris Peaks. He would never be here, pretending to be a rogue, dying from wolfsbane poisoning. Unless he was hiding from something even more dangerous than death itself. Lyrelai had dragged the unconscious rogue, or whoever he truly was, to her hearth, laying him on the threadbare rug that was the nicest thing she owned. By firelight, she could better see the wolfsbane poisoning spreading through his veins like dark spiderwebs beneath his skin. "Zephyra," she called to her younger sister, who'd been hiding in the back room, "bring my herb basket." The 13-year-old emerged cautiously, her silver eyes wide. Born after their parents died in a territorial skirmish, Zephyra was technically Pack, but would never be classified. She was too young, and as the sister of a rejected Omega, her prospects were already dim. "Is he really a rogue?" Zephyra whispered, setting down the basket. "I don't know what he is," Lyrelai admitted, crushing bitter root between her palms. She'd learned healing from the old Omega who'd taken her in after her rejection, knowledge passed down through generations of those deemed unworthy by regular Pack hierarchies. The stranger's fever was climbing dangerously high. She managed to get some antidote tea past his lips, but the wolfsbane had progressed too far for simple remedies. "Lyra," Zephyra gasped. "His wounds, they're moving." She was right. The poison marks seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, fighting against his body's attempts to heal. This wasn't ordinary wolfsbane. It had been enhanced somehow, designed to kill wolves specifically. As midnight approached, his breathing became more desperate. Lyrelai found herself doing something she'd never done for anyone. She began to sing. It was an old Omega comfort song, meant to soothe distressed pups. Her voice was nothing special, cracked from years of disuse. But as the melody filled the small cottage, the stranger's breathing seemed to ease slightly. His eyes suddenly snapped open, that amber gaze finding hers with startling clarity. He spoke in a language she didn't recognize, not the common tongue, but something older, more formal. The words were urgent, almost pleading. "I don't understand," she said softly. He tried to sit up, his hand reaching toward her face. The movement was so gentle, so at odds with his dangerous appearance, that she didn't pull away. His fingers barely grazed her cheek before his strength failed. But in that brief touch, something extraordinary happened. Warmth flooded through her, not romantic or sexual, but pure energy, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her dormant healing abilities, the ones she'd inherited from her grandmother but could never fully access as a rejected Omega, suddenly blazed to life. Without thinking, she pressed her hands to his chest, over the worst of the poisoning. Golden light erupted from her palms, not the weak glow she could sometimes manage, but brilliant, powerful healing energy. The wolfsbane recoiled from her touch, the dark veins retreating. But as her power met the poison, she felt something else underneath. His own energy, massive and constrained, like an ocean held back by a crumbling dam. This was no rogue. The power she sensed was ancient, refined, the kind that took generations of alpha breeding to achieve. His hand covered hers, and she felt his power deliberately retreat, hiding itself deeper. His eyes met hers with perfect clarity for just a moment, a silent plea for her to keep his secret. Then exhaustion crashed over her. Healing at that level had drained everything she had. The room spun, her vision darkening at the edges. "Lyra!" Zephyra cried out as she collapsed beside the stranger. But instead of unconsciousness, she fell into something else, a shared dream space that sometimes formed between compatible wolves. She stood in a moonlit forest clearing. The stranger was there, but transformed. Dressed in royal purple, a crown of silver on his brow. This was his true self, the one his unconscious mind couldn't hide. "You saved me," he said. And here in the dream, language barriers didn't exist. "Why? You don't know me." "Everyone deserves compassion," she replied. He stepped closer, and she could see the burden in his eyes. "I'm not who you think I am." "I know," she said simply. "You're the Alpha King, Theron Ravencrest." His expression crumbled. "How?" "Your power feels like mountains and storms. Only the Valdris bloodline carries that signature." She paused. "Why are you pretending to be a rogue?" "There's a coup," he said urgently. "My own council betrayed me. They're using enhanced wolfsbane to kill any alpha who won't submit to their new order. I was investigating the source when they ambushed me. My beta, Fenris, helped me escape. But we were separated." "So you hid among rogues?" "The last place they'd look for a king." His dream form flickered, growing transparent. "I'm waking up." But Lyrelai. He knew her name. Somehow, he knew it. "You're in danger now. Mordecai isn't just a beta. Something's wrong with him. Darkness clings to him like a second skin. And there's something else. Ancient markings in the old tongue speak of 6 seals. I fear we may have disturbed the first." The dream shattered. Lyrelai gasped awake on her floor, dawnlight streaming through her windows. The stranger, Theron, was unconscious but breathing steadily. The wolfsbane was retreating. But on his shoulder, where her hand had rested while healing him, a mark was forming. A healing bond, the rarest connection between wolf and healer, only formed when an Omega with healing gifts saved an Alpha from certain death. It would bind them until the healing was complete. He would feel her emotions, and she would sense his pain. It was temporary, usually lasting only days or weeks. But as she stared at the mark, it continued to darken, taking on the distinct pattern of something far more permanent. A mate mark. "That can't be," she whispered. Rejected Omegas couldn't form mate bonds. It was why she'd been cast aside. Zephyra's scream from outside shattered her thoughts. Lyra! Enforcers are coming! Through the window she could see Mordecai approaching with a dozen guards. His expression was murderous, but there was something wrong with his movements. Too fluid, as if something else moved beneath his skin. The unconscious Alpha King lay helpless on her floor, his identity exposed if anyone looked too closely. The mate mark on his shoulder seemed to pulse with warmth, and she felt an overwhelming need to protect him. As the enforcers reached her door, Theron's eyes opened, meeting hers with perfect understanding. Whatever happened next, they were bound now. The door exploded inward, and Mordecai's voice filled her home. By order of the new council, you're under arrest for harboring a dangerous fugitive. Step away from the rogue, Lorelei. Mordecai's voice carried the edge of barely controlled violence as he stood in her destroyed doorway, flanked by enforcers in black armor she'd never seen before. Not pack guards. These were something else. Shadows seemed to writhe beneath Mordecai's skin, barely visible but definitely there. Lyrali positioned herself between them and Theron, who was struggling to sit up. He's legally mine. I paid for him. The law has changed. Mordecai smiled coldly, his expression flickering between his own and something else. The new council has decreed all rogues must be examined for contamination. Some carry diseases that threaten our new order. What new order? What council? Lyrali demanded. The weak Alpha Kings have fallen. A stronger government rises, one that values strength over bloodline. His pale eyes fixed on Theron, and for a moment, they turned completely black before shifting back. This particular rogue has been spreading sedition through the territories. Haven't you, Kaelin? Theron kept his head down, playing his part, but Lyrali felt his tension through their new bond, a burning rage carefully contained. Take him, Mordecai ordered. No. Lyrali's refusal rang out clear. If you want him, you'll have to go through me. Mordecai laughed, but the sound had multiple layers, as if several voices spoke at once. A rejected Omega challenges me? He moved faster than she could track, backhanding her across the face. The crack echoed through the cottage. Lyrali tasted blood, stumbling backward. That was his mistake. The growl that erupted from Theron was nothing like a rogue's snarl. It was pure alpha dominance, primal and terrifying, shaking the very walls. His eyes blazed purple gold as he lunged upward, sick and poisoned but moving with lethal intent. Mordecai barely got his blade up in time, the silver edge catching Theron across the ribs instead of his throat. But even wounded, even weakened, the disguised Alpha King fought like a force of nature. Wolfsbane blades! Mordecai shouted, his voice fracturing into those multiple tones again. Now! The enforcers drew weapons coated in the same poison that had nearly killed Theron before. He faltered, the previous poisoning making him hypersensitive to even the scent of it. Stop! Lyrali threw herself between them, but something extraordinary happened. The moment she moved to protect him, her healing power erupted outward, not in a controlled stream, but as a protective barrier of golden light. The enforcers stumbled backward, their wolfsbane blades actually smoking where the light touched them. Fascinating, Mordecai breathed, and now his voice was definitely not entirely his own. You're rejected. You can't have that kind of power. Get out, Lyrali commanded, feeling strength she'd never known flow through her. The bond with Theron was amplifying her abilities, his alpha power feeding hers. But Mordecai's shock transformed into something worse. Greed. Oh, this is perfect. A rejected Omega with hidden power, bound to a mysterious rogue? They will be very pleased. They? Lyrali frowned, catching the strange emphasis. He pulled out a horn, and its bitter note echoed across Shadowmere. Let's see how long your newfound power lasts against a real hunt. Answering howls rose from every direction, not just enforcers, Full hunting parties. Run, Theron rasped, grabbing her hand. Now. They fled through the back door as Zephyra emerged from her hiding spot. I'm coming too. No, Lyra Lee started, but her sister's eyes flashed with determination. They'll use me against you if I stay. We survived side by side. No time to argue. The howls were getting closer. They plunged into the dark wood that bordered Shadowmere, Theron leading despite his injuries. He moved like someone who knew every hidden path, every secret route, not like a rogue at all. Who are you really? Lyra gasped as they ran. Later, he growled, pulling her behind a massive oak as a patrol passed nearby. Through their bond, she felt his pain, his desperate need to shift to wolf form, but inability to do so. The wolfsbane still blocking his transformation. She pressed her hand to his chest, pushing healing energy into him, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a cup. Too strong, he muttered. The poison they're using, it's specifically designed to block alpha transformations. Then how do we escape? His eyes met hers, and she saw him make a decision. There's a way. But you won't like it. Before she could ask, he tilted his head back and released a howl unlike anything she'd ever heard. It was beautiful and terrible, carrying harmonics that seemed to reach into her very soul. Answering howls came immediately, but not from their pursuers. These came from ahead, from the deep woods where even brave wolves feared to tread. What did you do? Zephyra whispered. Called the real rogues, Theron said grimly, the ones who refused the new council's rule. They know my call, even if they don't know my face. Shapes emerged from the shadows, scarred, wild-looking wolves who'd chosen exile over submission. Their leader, a massive gray wolf missing an eye, shifted to human form. You use the old howl, he growled suspiciously. That's a royal call? Who are you? Someone who opposes the council, Theron replied carefully. Will you help? The rogue leader's attention shifted to Liralai, nostrils flaring. You're bonded. Both of you. His one eye widened. That's a true mate bond forming, but you're a rejected Omega. That's unprecedented, yes, Lyra Lee said tiredly. Will you help us or not? A fierce smile crossed the rogue's scarred face. The council hunts you. That's recommendation enough. Follow. They were led deeper into the woods, to a hidden ravine where dozens of rogues had made camp. It was nothing like the savage den Lirali had expected. Organized, defensive, almost military. The council thinks we're mindless beasts, the leader, who introduced himself as Garrett, explained. Makes it easier to resist when they underestimate us. How many have resisted? Theron asked. Thousands, scattered across the territories. The council's control isn't as complete as they claim, but their wolfsbane weapons give them the advantage. What if I could neutralize the wolfsbane? Lyra Lee asked suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at her. My healing light. It destroyed their poisoned blades. If I could amplify it somehow. Garrett's eye gleamed. Then we'd have a fighting chance. But amplifying Omega healing requires an alpha's power, freely given through a completed bond. Lyrelai felt Theron tense beside her. A completed bond meant a claiming bite, irreversible and permanent. For a rejected Omega and the hidden Alpha King, it would change everything. Horns echoed through the forest. The hunt had found their trail. Decide quickly, Garrett growled. Fight or flee. But if that really is a true mate bond forming between you, the council will never stop hunting you. They fear mated pairs above all else. The power you could wield side by side would threaten everything they've built. Theron turned to Lyrelai, and in his amber eyes she saw the truth he'd been hiding. Not just his identity, but his growing feelings for her. Through their bond, She felt his desperate desire to protect her warring with the knowledge that binding himself to her would make her a target forever. "We stand as one," she whispered, squeezing his hand. He cupped her face gently, and for a moment, the hunted Alpha King disappeared, leaving just a man looking at his mate with wonder. "As one, then," he agreed. The hunting horns sounded again, closer now. Mordecai's voice carried on the wind, but it sounded wrong. Multiple voices layered together, promising rewards for their capture. But as Theron leaned toward her, his canines extending for the claiming bite, an arrow whistled through the air, striking him in the shoulder. Not wolfsbane, something worse. "Moonsbane," Garrett snarled as Theron convulsed, his body beginning to shift uncontrollably between forms. "The Council's new weapon. It forces transformation loops. He'll tear himself apart." Lyrelai caught Theron as he fell, his body shifting rapidly, human, wolf, human again, each change accompanied by agonizing screams. Through their incomplete bond, she felt his torment, and something primal rose within her. Not just her healing power, but something deeper, older, the rage of an Omega watching her mate suffer. Her eyes blazed gold as she stood, power rippling off her in waves. "They want to hunt?" she growled, her voice carrying harmonics it never had before. "Then let them face something worthy of their fear." The very forest seemed to respond to her fury, and even the rogues stepped back in alarm. Whatever was happening to Lyrelai, it was beyond normal Omega abilities. Mordecai and his enforcers crashed into the ravine, weapons raised. They stopped dead at the sight of her, transformed by rage and power into something magnificent and terrifying. "Hello, Mordecai," she smiled, and it was all teeth. "Let me show you what a rejected Omega can truly become." The power erupting from Lyrelai made the air itself crackle with electricity. Golden light poured from her skin, but threaded through it were ribbons of deep purple. Alpha power that shouldn't exist in any Omega, rejected or not. Mordecai's enforcers raised their wolfsbane weapons, but the blades began to dissolve the moment they entered her aura. The poison literally burned away, leaving only clean steel. "What are you?" Mordecai breathed, stepping backward. The shadows beneath his skin writhed violently, responding to her power. "I am what you made me," Lyrelai snarled. "Years of rejection, of being told I was defective, broken. But I was never broken. I was waiting." She knelt beside Theron, who was still convulsing between forms. Placing her hands on his chest, she didn't just push healing energy into him. She pulled the moonsbane out, absorbing it into herself. The poison that should have killed her instantly was consumed by the strange purple-gold power flowing through her veins. Theron's transformation stopped. He lay gasping in human form, staring up at her in awe. "The Valdris line," Garrett whispered behind them. "She carries the ancient blood." The stories were true. "What stories?" Zephyra asked. "Centuries ago, the first Alpha King had a twin sister, an Omega of unprecedented power. She could amplify any Alpha's strength, neutralize any poison, heal any wound. The bloodline was thought lost when she disappeared into the common population, refusing royal life. Lyrelai's power flickered as the revelation hit her. She wasn't just a rejected Omega. She was the heir to a bloodline the new council feared above all others. "Take them!" Mordecai roared, but his voice shattered into multiple tones, masculine, feminine, ancient, young. "The masters demand their capture." But the rogues moved to surround Lyrelai and Theron, protecting them. These exiled wolves recognized what they were seeing, not just a true mate pair, but the return of the ancient balance between Alpha and Omega power. "You should run," Garrett advised. "Make for the Valdris Peaks. If the Alpha King still has loyalists—" "I am the Alpha King," Theron said quietly, rising to his feet. Silence fell over the ravine. Then Garrett laughed, wild and delighted. Of course you are. Who else would be mad enough to hide among rogues? He dropped to one knee, and the other rogues followed. My king. Rise, Theron commanded. I'm not your king anymore. The council? The council are usurpers, Garrett interrupted. We knew something was wrong when they claimed you'd died. Your father would never have appointed those power-hungry fools. Mordecai was backing away, his movements becoming increasingly erratic as the shadows fought for control of his body. This changes nothing. The old bloodlines are obsolete. The future belongs to... His words cut off as his body convulsed violently. The shadows erupted from his skin, coalescing into a vague humanoid shape that spoke in an ancient tongue. The Shadow Collective, the entity announced, its voice like grinding stone. We are Legion. We have guided your kind for centuries, preparing for this moment. Preparing for what? Theron demanded. The breaking of the seals, of course. 6 barriers between your world and the void. When the rejected rises and the hidden king emerges, the first seal weakens. You've played your parts perfectly. New horns sounded, not from the hunters, but from the north. Through the trees, Lirali could see them coming. Hundreds of wolves in formation, led by figures in crimson armor. The new council itself had come. Excellent, the shadow entity hissed. All the players gather. A woman emerged from the ranks, everything Lirali wasn't. Tall, perfectly formed, an alpha female with pure white fur even in human form. This was Seraphina Coldfang, head of the new council. Hello, Theron, she purred. You led us quite a chase, but it's over now. Sarah. Theron's voice was heavy with betrayal. We trained side by side. How could you? How could I overthrow a weak king who valued mercy over strength? Easily. Her ice-blue eyes fixed on Lirale. And this is the rejected Omega you've chosen? How far the mighty have fallen. She's more than you'll ever be, Theron snarled. Seraphina laughed. She's an anomaly, a genetic throwback that should have been eliminated at birth. She raised her hand, and her guards aimed crossbows loaded with black-tipped arrows. Void's Bane, our newest creation. It doesn't just block transformation or cause pain. It severs the soul from the body. Even your precious healing light can't fix death itself. You would commit such atrocity? Theron was horrified. I would secure our future. Seraphina smiled coldly. Fire! Everything happened at once. Theron threw himself in front of Lirali. Zephyra screamed. The rogues charged. And Lirali felt something inside her snap. Not break, but release. Like chains she hadn't known existed falling away. The arrows stopped mid-flight, suspended in air by ribbons of purple-gold power. The very forest responded to her will, roots erupting from the earth to entangle the council guard, branches becoming spears that turned on their wielders. Enough! Lirali's voice wasn't entirely human anymore. She rose into the air, power lifting her like invisible wings. Her rejected Omega status had been a lie, a seal placed on her power by those who feared what she might become. But the mate bond with Theron, incomplete as it was, had cracked that seal, and her rage had shattered it entirely. I am Lirali of the Lost Line, she declared, ancient knowledge flooding her mind. Heir to Luna's blessing, keeper of the first balance. You have poisoned our people, murdered our kin, and broken the sacred laws. Seraphina's perfect composure finally cracked. Kill her! Kill them all! But her guards were hesitating, ancestral memory recognizing the authority in Lirale's voice. Kneel, Lirale commanded, and half the battalion dropped to their knees involuntarily. Or face the judgment of the moon itself. That's when Fenris arrived, Theron's loyal beta, leading a force of royal guards who'd remained faithful. My king! We've come. The battle erupted in chaos. Loyalists against council forces, rogues fighting alongside royal guards, and at the center of it all, Lyreley and Theron stood back to back, their incomplete bond pulsing with desperate need to unite their power fully. "We need to complete it," Theron said urgently. "Only together can we end this." But Seraphina had one more card to play. She grabbed Zephyra, a blade to the young girl's throat. "Complete that bond, and she dies." Lyreley's power faltered, her attention split. "You wouldn't," Theron growled. "I've done worse for less," Seraphina replied. "Choose, false king, your mate bond or the girl's life." But Zephyra, quiet, overlooked Zephyra, looked up at her captor and smiled. "You made one mistake." "What?" Seraphina frowned. "You assumed I'm just human?" Zephyra's eyes flashed silver, and she shifted, not into a wolf, but something else. Something that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. A white dragon, small but perfect, wreathed in silver flames that didn't burn but froze everything they touched. Seraphina screamed, her arm turning to ice where Zephyra's transformed body touched it. The council leader stumbled backward as the dragon child spread wings that shouldn't exist in their world. "Dragon shifters," Garrett breathed in awe, "the first shapers." They were real. In the chaos of everyone's shock, Lyreley and Theron moved. He bit her neck just as she bit his, their mate bond completing in a rush of unified power that sent shockwaves through both armies. When they pulled apart, their eyes were the same color, purple gold, the perfect fusion of Alpha and Omega, the balance restored. "The revolution is over," Theron declared, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Stand down, or face judgment." The shadow entity that had possessed Mordecai laughed, its form solidifying. "You think this victory matters? We are eternal. The seals will break one by one until the void consumes all." "Then we'll stop you," Lyreley said calmly. "Every time." She reached out with her power, not to destroy, but to purify. The golden light touched the shadow entity, and it screamed. Not in pain, but in confusion as the light began to separate the darkness from the human soul it had consumed. What remained was Mordecai, the real Mordecai, collapsed and weeping. "Forgive me," he gasped. "It's been in my head for so long, whispering, controlling. I fought, but—" Seraphina tried to run, but roots held her fast. The remaining council forces surrendered, faced with power beyond their comprehension. "Your reign of poison is over," Lyreley declared. "Justice will be served through healing, not vengeance." She turned to Theron, her mate, her king, her equal. "Ready to rebuild our world?" He smiled, pulling her close. "With you, always." The throne room of Valdris Peaks had been reclaimed, but victory felt incomplete. 3 days had passed since Seraphina's defeat, yet Lyreley couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient watched from the shadows. Not the shadow collective they'd faced, but something far older. Theron stood before the ancient seat of power while Lyreley examined the walls, her fingers tracing symbols that seemed to pulse under her touch. "These aren't just decorations," she murmured. "They're warnings. When 6 seals weaken, the hungry shall wake. First when opposites unite, second when the moon devours the sun." She paused. "We're the opposites. Rejected Omega and hidden king." "My king," Fenris entered, bowing low. "We've found something you need to see." They were led to the castle's lower vaults, where the council had been conducting their experiments. The scene that greeted them was horrific. Cages filled with test subjects, Omegas and rogues who'd been exposed to various poisons. But in the furthest cage sat someone who made Theron freeze. "Hello, son," the man said, rising gracefully despite the chains. He was older, dignified even in captivity, with eyes exactly like Theron's. "Father?" Theron breathed. But you're dead. The council said. The council says many things, former King Aldrich replied. They kept me alive to legitimize their rule, forcing me to sign decrees under duress. The Shadow Collective needed a puppet, and I served their purpose. How long? Lyrelai asked softly. How long have they been infiltrating? Generations, Aldrich said gravely. They're not invaders. They're parasites, feeding on negative emotions, growing stronger with each host. But that's not the real danger. His eyes met Lyrelai's. You've broken the first seal. 4 days until the solar eclipse breaks the second. And when it does, something far worse than shadows will emerge. What could be worse? Theron demanded. The original shapeshifter. The one who gave us the gift. And the curse. A temperature drop made them all shiver. Ice formed on the walls as a figure materialized from frozen mist, beautiful and terrible, with skin like porcelain and eyes of infinite darkness. Hello, children, she said, her voice like breaking glass. I am the eternal hunger, and you've finally freed me enough to take form. The Shadow Collective, Lyralee began, were my heralds, nothing more. Preparing the way, weakening the seals from within, the hunger circled them slowly. Your ancestors stole something from me, you see, the gift of shape. I was the first to change, the first to transform. But the process broke me, left me trapped between forms, never solid, never complete. So they sealed me away and kept my gift for themselves. You're lying, Theron growled. Am I? The hunger gestured, and the test subjects in the cages began to change, not into wolves, but into twisted amalgamations, creatures caught between forms in perpetual agony. This is what I became. What your ancestors made me. And now, with each seal that breaks, I grow closer to reclaiming what was mine. We'll stop you, Lyralee said firmly. The hunger laughed. With what? Your pretty lights? Your mate bond? Child, I exist in the space between shapes. Every transformation feeds me. The eclipse will shatter the second seal, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. She began to fade, but not before touching Lyralee's chest. A mark appeared, not dark, but void, absence rather than presence. A gift, the hunger whispered. So you can feel what I feel. The endless hunger of being trapped between forms. Let's see how long your sanity lasts. When she vanished, Lyralee gasped, clutching at the mark. She could feel it. The terrible sensation of being neither one thing nor another, constantly shifting, never complete. Get it off, she whispered, panic rising. Get it off. Theron pulled her close, their bond flaring as he tried to share the burden. Through their connection, he felt a fraction of what she was experiencing, and his face went pale. We need the old knowledge, Aldrich said urgently. The First Shaper's archives. If there's a way to stop this, it's there. I know where they are, Zephyra said quietly. Everyone had almost forgotten she was there. Mother told me stories. She said our family came from the mountains where dragons first learned to fly. The sanctuary of first shapes. Dragons aren't real, Fenris said automatically. Zephyra's eyes flashed silver. Want to bet? She shifted again, her dragon form slightly larger than before, more defined. Silver flames danced along her scales. By the moon, Aldrich breathed. The dragon line survived. We need to go, Lyralee said through gritted teeth. The void mark was spreading, sending waves of disconnection through her body. The eclipse is in 4 days, if we don't find answers. We will, Theron said firmly. I promise you, we will. They set out that night, Theron, Lyralee, Zephyra, Fenris, and a small guard of trusted wolves. The journey to the sanctuary would take 3 days if they pushed hard. On the second night, Camped in the ruins of an ancient temple, Lyrelai woke to find the void mark had spread to her neck. When she tried to shift to wolf form, nothing happened. The mark was blocking her transformation. "It's stealing my shape," she realized with horror, "making me like her, trapped between forms." Theron held her as she shook, their bond the only thing anchoring her to her humanity. "Fight it," he whispered. "You're stronger than this." "Am I?" Lyrelai asked. "Or am I just postponing the inevitable?" On the third day, they reached the sanctuary. It was carved into the living mountain, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. As they entered, the walls began to glow, responding to Zephyr's dragon nature. In the center chamber, they found it, not books or scrolls, but a pool of liquid silver that showed visions of the past. They saw the truth. The eternal hunger had been a woman once, the first to discover shape-shifting through a bargain with something from beyond the void. But the process had gone wrong, trapping her between forms. In desperation, she'd shared the gift with others, hoping they could help her. Instead, they'd sealed her away and kept the power for themselves. "She wasn't evil," Lyrelai whispered. "She was suffering." "That doesn't excuse what she's become," Theron said. "No," Lyrelai agreed. "But it might be the key to stopping her." The pool showed them more: the nature of the seals, the way to strengthen them, or break them entirely. And a third option no one had considered. "We could heal her," Lyrelai said slowly. "Not seal her, not destroy her, but complete her transformation. Give her the solid form she never achieved." "That's insane," Fenris protested. "She's been trapped for millennia. The hunger has consumed everything she was." "Has it?" Lyrelai touched the void mark on her chest. "I can feel her through this. Beneath the hunger, there's still a soul. Broken, yes. Twisted by isolation and pain, but still there." "The eclipse is tomorrow," Theron reminded them. "We need to decide." Lyrelai stood at the pool's edge, her reflection wavering between human and something else. The void mark had spread to half her body now. Soon she'd be just like the hunger, trapped, incomplete, eternal. "Unless I have a plan," she said. "But none of you are going to like it." The eclipse began at noon the next day. They stood in a circle of ancient stones, the original ritual site where shapeshifting was first discovered. Lyrelai was at the center, the void mark now covering most of her body. She could barely hold human form. The hunger appeared as the sun began to disappear. "Come to watch the second seal break?" How thoughtful. "Come to make you an offer," Lyrelai said. The hunger paused, intrigued. "You want your solid form back. I want to keep my shape-shifting ability, but we both know the void mark is consuming me. Soon, I'll be just like you, trapped between forms, forever hungry." "Your point?" "Merge with me," Lyrelai said simply. "Not possession, not consumption. A true merging. Your experience with my power, your ancient knowledge with my healing light. Together, we might achieve what neither can alone, a complete transformation." "Lyrelai, no." Theron stepped forward, but she held up her hand. "Trust me," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Through our bond, you'll anchor me. Keep me myself. But she needs this. We both do." The hunger was silent for a long moment. Then, "You would risk everything to heal me? After all I've done?" "Everyone deserves a chance at wholeness," Lyrelai replied. "Even you." The eclipse reached totality, the second seal shattered, and the hunger made her choice. She flowed into Lyrelai, not as an invasion but as an acceptance, two broken beings trying to become whole. The pain was indescribable, millennia of hunger, of isolation, of rage and sorrow flooding through Lyrelai's consciousness. But through it all, Theron's bond held her steady. His love, their connection, the promise of pack and family and home. It gave her something the hunger had never had. An anchor. Light exploded from Lirali's form. Not gold or purple or void, but all colors, all possibilities. When it faded, she stood transformed. Her hair was streaked with silver. Her eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, but she was solid, complete, whole. And beside her, formed from the excess energy, stood another woman. Ancient, tired, but solid for the first time in millennia. The former hunger touched her own face in wonder. I can feel. I'm real. You're free, Lyralee corrected. We both are. The remaining seals didn't shatter. They dissolved. No longer needed. The threat they'd guarded against had been transformed into something else. What am I now? The ancient woman asked. Whatever you choose to be, Theron said, stepping forward to take Lirali's hand. That's what shapeshifting truly is. The power to choose who we become. The woman nodded slowly, then looked at Lirali. You saved me. After everything, you saved me. We saved each other, Lyralee corrected. Your knowledge, my power, our combined will to survive. Neither of us could have done it alone. I need a name, the woman said. I've been the hunger for so long I've forgotten who I was before. Aurora, Zephyra suggested, for new dawn. Aurora smiled, the expression transforming her ancient face. Aurora, yes, I like that. As the eclipse ended and sunlight returned, Lyrali felt the change in the world itself. The rigid boundaries between shapes were softer now. Some wolves discovered they could take additional forms. Some omegas found strength they'd never had. Some alphas learned gentleness. We've changed everything, Fenris said in awe. No, Lyralee corrected, pulling Theron close. We've just given everyone the same choice we had, to become who they truly are. 1 year later. The Festival of Shapes filled the Valdris courtyard with laughter and wonder. Wolves who could become birds, dragons who could become wolves, and some who'd discovered entirely new forms celebrated together. Lyralee stood on the balcony, watching Zephyra teach young shapeshifters how to control their transformations. The girl had grown into her power beautifully, becoming the bridge between the old ways and the new. No regrets? Theron asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, their bond humming with contentment. How could I regret this? Below them, Aurora worked with the healers, teaching them the ancient knowledge she'd preserved through her millennia of existence. The former eternal hunger had become their greatest teacher, her suffering transformed into wisdom. The rejected Omega who bought a rogue for 1 silver, Theron murmured against her hair. Look what you've become. Look what we've become, she corrected, turning in his arms. A king who walked among rogues. A queen who rose from rejection, together. Always together, he agreed, then paused. Though technically, we say that a lot. Lyrali laughed. Then let's say something new. She pulled him down for a kiss. How about forever evolving? Perfect, he whispered against her lips. As the moon rose full and bright over their transformed kingdom, Lirali felt the truth of it. They were no longer bound by the old limitations, the rigid roles that had once defined them. They were free to become whatever they chose, to shift not just in form but in possibility. The rejected had become the crown. The hidden had become the revealed. The hungry had become the satisfied. And their greatest adventure, shepherding a world of infinite shapes and choices, stretched endlessly before them. In the courtyard below, a young Omega who'd been rejected just that morning stood alone, tears on her cheeks. Aurora approached her, offering a gentle hand. Come, The ancient woman said. Let me tell you about transformation. Real transformation. It starts with accepting that broken doesn't mean worthless. The girl took her hand, hope kindling in her eyes. And so the story continued, each ending a new beginning, each shape a new possibility. The moon smiled down on them all, its light a promise. What you are is not who you must remain. Change is not just possible, it's inevitable. Choose your shape wisely, but know you can always choose again.